My name is Sarah, and I have a story to tell you. It all began when I was just a little kid, maybe 5 or 6 years old. That was when my parents split up. My dad, whose name is Mark, couldn't take it anymore. My mom, Linda, had been riding him for years about not making enough money, always putting him down and making him feel inadequate. I remember this one time when Dad came home excited about a promotion at work. He was grinning from ear to ear, proud of himself for once. Mom just looked at him and said, "That's it? I thought you'd finally gotten a real job." The light went out of his eyes. It was like watching someone deflate. So, yes, Dad left. I can't say I blame him now looking back, but at the time it felt like my whole world was falling apart. Mom, however, saw an opportunity. She figured out pretty quickly that being a poor, abandoned single mother could get her a lot of perks at work. She'd lay it on thick with her boss. "I'm so sorry I'm late again, Mr. Johnson." She'd sniffle. Sarah was sick, and with no one to help, Mr. Johnson would pat her hand and tell her not to worry. Meanwhile, I was perfectly fine, spending the morning watching cartoons while Mom did her hair and makeup. Family gatherings were the worst. Mom would hold court, dramatically recounting how Dad had left us with nothing. I'd squirm in my seat, uncomfortable with the lie but not daring to speak up. Even at that age, I knew better than to contradict Mom in public. What no one knew was that Dad was sending money every month, child support he called it. Mom would scoff when the checks came in. "Look at this, Sarah," she'd say, waving the paper in my face. "Your father thinks this pittance is enough to raise a child on. Pathetic." I didn't know how much it was supposed to be. All I knew was that it made Mom angry, and when Mom was angry, life got harder for me. As the years went by, I started noticing things, like how Mom would look at me sometimes, her eyes narrowing like she was seeing something she didn't like. Later, I realized it was because I looked too much like Dad. It brought back memories for her, and not the good kind. But she kept me around. I was useful, you see. The picture of the struggling single mom and her brave little girl was too good to pass up. It got her sympathy, special treatment, and even some government assistance. Then, when I was about 10 years old, everything changed again. Mom met Richard. Rich, successful Richard. Suddenly, being a struggling single mom wasn't so appealing anymore. No. Now she had a new image to cultivate, the devoted wife of a prominent businessman, and I didn't fit into that picture so well. It started small at first. Mom would forget to wash my clothes, leaving me with nothing clean to wear to school. I'd show up in wrinkled, stained outfits, my face burning with shame as the other kids whispered and pointed. Then came the food situation. Mom would cook these elaborate meals for her and Richard, filling the house with mouth-watering smells, but when I'd come to the table, she'd frown. "Oh, Sarah, I'm sorry. I didn't make enough for 3. Why don't you make yourself a sandwich?" I'd retreat to the kitchen, my stomach growling, as I slapped together a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Through the door, I could hear Mom and Richard laughing, the clink of wine glasses a stark contrast to my meager meal. The worst was when she started messing with my schoolwork. I'd spend hours on an assignment, only to have it disappear the next morning. I'd show up to class empty-handed, stammering excuses to my teacher. My grades started to slip, and the teachers began giving me concerned looks. Through it all, Richard remained oblivious. He was always buried in his work, and when he wasn't, his attention was solely on Mom. She'd simper and coo at him, playing the part of the adoring wife. "Richard, darling, you work so hard," she'd say, massaging his shoulders. "You deserve to relax." He'd smile up at her, completely under her spell. "What would I do without you, Linda?" Things got even worse when Mom announced she was pregnant. Richard was over the moon, and Mom milked it for all it was worth. "The doctor says I need plenty of rest," she'd tell me, lounging on the couch. "Be a dear and tidy up the house, won't you?" I'd spend my afternoons cleaning while Mom napped or chatted with her friends on the phone. When Richard came home, she'd struggle to her feet, one hand on her barely there bump. "Oh, honey, I'm so tired," she'd sigh. Growing a baby is hard work. Richard would rush to her side, all concern. "Sit down, my love. Sarah, bring your mother some water." As the months wore on, I felt more and more isolated. At school, I withdrew from my friends, too embarrassed to invite them over. At home, I was little more than a servant, expected to cater to Mom's every whim. One night, as I lay in bed listening to Mom and Richard cooing over nursery designs, something in me snapped. I couldn't do this anymore. I needed out. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and did something I'd never dared to do before. I called my dad and told him everything, the neglect, the mind games, the constant feeling of being unwanted. Dad listened in silence, only the sound of his breathing telling me he was still there. When I finally ran out of words, there was a long pause. "Pack your bags," he said at last, his voice hard. "I'm coming to get you." The next morning, I woke up early, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. I had already packed my bags the night before, unable to sleep from anticipation. As I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, I heard Mom's voice from the kitchen. "Going somewhere, Sarah?" I froze, expecting a confrontation, but when I turned, I saw Mom leaning against the doorframe, a strange smile on her face. She looked relieved. "I'm going to live with Dad," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. To my shock, Mom's smile widened. "Well, it's about time," she said, her tone almost cheerful. "Richard and I could use the extra space for the baby." Her words hit me like a slap, but before I could respond, I heard a car horn outside. Dad was here. Mom walked me to the door, that unsettling smile still in place. "Have a good life, Sarah," she said, practically shooing me out. As I walked to Dad's car, I glanced back. Mom stood in the doorway, looking frankly joyful as she waved goodbye. It was the happiest I'd seen her in years, and it was because I was leaving. Dad's apartment was small, but it felt more like home than anywhere I'd lived in years. However, we wouldn't be there for long. Over the next few months, I watched in awe as Dad's business took off like a rocket. It seemed like every week brought news of a new contract, a big client, or an expansion. Within a year, we were house hunting in the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. The house we ended up buying was nothing short of spectacular. 3 stories of modern architecture with floor-to-ceiling windows and a backyard that looked like something out of a magazine. My room was bigger than our entire old apartment. While Dad worked long hours managing his now booming business, I threw myself into making our big house a home. I learned to cook gourmet meals, filling the place with amazing smells. I kept things tidy, managed the household staff, and even started a vegetable garden in our spacious backyard. As the months passed, I watched Dad's hard work continue to pay off. His business kept growing, and with it, our lifestyle improved even more. I transferred to the most prestigious private school in the city. On my 16th birthday, Dad surprised me with a car. Not just any car, but a brand new luxury SUV. "Now you can drive yourself to school in style," he said, tossing me the keys, "and maybe run some errands for your old man." As I settled into my new life, I thought about Mom less and less. She never tried to contact me, and I made no effort to reach out to her or any of my maternal relatives. The wounds were still too raw, the memories too painful. Instead, I focused on my studies. Years passed, and before I knew it, I was graduating college with honors. As I stood on that stage accepting my diploma, I searched the crowd for Dad's face. He was there, beaming with pride, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. This was what it felt like to be loved, truly and unconditionally. After the ceremony, Dad pulled me aside. "I've got something for you," he said, his eyes twinkling with excitement. He handed me a small box. Inside was a key. "It's for your new apartment in the city center. Consider it a graduation gift." Tears welled up in my eyes as I hugged him fiercely. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." It had been a few years since I graduated from college. My career was taking off, I had a beautiful apartment in the city, and life was good. Dad and I had settled into a comfortable routine of weekly dinners and long phone calls. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. The news came like a thunderbolt out of a clear sky. Dad was sick, cancer, advanced. The doctor's words blurred together in a haze of medical jargon, but the gist was clear. It was bad. From that moment on, my world narrowed to a singular focus, saving Dad. I took a leave of absence from work, moving back into his house to take care of him. Every waking moment was devoted to his care. I researched treatments, consulted specialists, and tried alternative therapies, anything that might give us a fighting chance. The months that followed were a brutal cycle of hope and despair. For every good day when Dad felt strong enough to sit in the garden or share a meal, there were 3 bad ones, filled with pain and nausea from the treatments. One evening, as I was helping him back to bed after a particularly rough day, he turned to me with a serious look. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to promise me something." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Promise me you'll live your life. Really live it. Don't let this hold you back." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was going to be fine, but we both knew better. So instead, I squeezed his hand and said, "I promise, Dad." He died 2 weeks later. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath, telling him how much I loved him, how grateful I was for everything he'd done for me. The next few days passed in a blur. I felt numb, going through the motions of arranging the funeral. There were so many details to handle: the casket, the flowers, the obituary. It all felt surreal, like I was planning an event for someone else. I was at the funeral home trying to decide on music for the service when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello, Sarah? It's your mother." I nearly dropped the phone. After all these years of silence, she was calling now? "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. "I heard about Mark," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'd like to help with the funeral arrangements. I wanted to hang up, to tell her to go to hell, but I was so tired, so overwhelmed. And a tiny part of me, a part I thought I'd buried long ago, yearned for a mother's comfort. "Okay," I heard myself say, "you can help." As I ended the call, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just opened a door I should have kept firmly shut. But with Dad gone, Mom was the only family I had left. Mom arrived at the funeral home an hour after our call, with my half-brother Thomas in tow. The kid was about 13, now gangly and awkward. I watched as Mom fussed over him, straightening his tie, smoothing his hair. It was like a knife to the gut, seeing her shower Thomas with the affection I'd been denied my entire childhood. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Despite my reservations, I put her to work. To my surprise, Mom turned out to be surprisingly helpful, managing the catering, arranging the flowers, and dealing with the endless parade of well-wishers. The funeral itself was a blur. I remember standing there, numb, as people I barely knew came up to offer condolences. Linda stayed close, her hand occasionally touching my arm in what I suppose was meant to be a comforting gesture. It felt strange, this sudden maternal presence after years of neglect. After the service, as people were filing out of the cemetery, Linda approached me again. "Sarah, I know this might not be the best time, but I'd like to stay in touch. Maybe we could get coffee sometime?" I stared at her. This woman who had made my childhood a living hell, who had been thrilled to see me leave, but she was also the only family I had left. "Maybe," I said finally. "I'll think about it." To my surprise, Linda kept her word. In the weeks that followed, she called regularly, her voice always tinged with concern. "How are you holding up, sweetie?" she'd ask. "Is there anything you need?" At first I was guarded, giving short, non-committal answers. But as the days wore on and the reality of Dad's absence set in, I found myself craving any kind of connection, even if it was with Linda. Our conversations started simple enough. She'd ask about my job, my apartment, my friends. But gradually, her questions began to shift. "Your father's business," she'd say casually. "I hope it's not causing you too much stress. Mark always worked so hard." I'd deflect, changing the subject. The truth was, I was still trying to wrap my head around everything Dad had left me, the company, the real estate portfolio. It was overwhelming, and something in me, some instinct honed by years of Linda's manipulations, told me to keep quiet about it. As weeks turned into months, Linda's hints became less subtle. "Thomas is looking at colleges," she mentioned during one call. "The tuition these days, it's just astronomical. I don't know how we're going to manage it." I made a non-committal noise, my guard instantly up. Another time, it was Richard's had some setbacks at work. The economy, it's hitting everyone hard. Each conversation seemed to circle back to money, to the struggles they were facing, and each time I could feel the unspoken expectation hanging in the air. Despite my initial reservations, Linda's persistent displays of maternal affection began to wear down my defenses. Against my better judgment, I started providing small amounts of financial assistance. It started innocently enough, helping Thomas with his SAT prep courses, buying Linda a new laptop when hers broke down, even covering a month's rent when Richard's company went through a rough patch. "You're an angel, Sarah," Linda would gush. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Each time, I felt a warmth in my chest. Was this what it felt like to have a real family? Meanwhile, I threw myself into running Dad's company. I made his longtime deputy the director, staying on as the owner and reserving the right to make all important decisions. It was challenging work, but I felt closer to Dad every time I sat in his old office. As the months passed, Linda's requests grew more frequent and more substantial. What started as occasional help turned into regular expectations. The breaking point came on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. I was knee-deep in quarterly reports when Linda called. "Sarah, darling," she began, her voice dripping with sweetness, "we've been thinking, it's been so long since we had a proper family vacation. We found this amazing package deal for a European tour." I felt my stomach drop. "Linda, I don't know. It would mean so much to Thomas," she interrupted. "And after all we've been through, don't you think we deserve a little happiness?" Guilt warred with resentment in my chest. Before I knew it, I'd agreed to fund their trip. But it didn't stop there. The day after they returned, Linda was on the phone again, now about Thomas's college fund. "We'll need you to set that up right away," she said. her tone no longer sweet but demanding. He's got his heart set on Princeton, you know. Something in me snapped. All the years of neglect, the emotional abuse, the manipulation, it all came rushing back. No, I said, my voice shaking. No more, Mom, I'm done. There was a pause, then Linda's voice came back, cold and hard. After everything we've done for you, you ungrateful little scum, how dare you turn your back on your family? I laughed, a bitter sound. Family? You mean the mother who was thrilled to see me leave? The one who made my childhood a living hell? The argument escalated quickly. Linda dropped all pretense of affection, hurling accusations and insults. I gave as good as I got, years of pent-up anger and hurt pouring out. You're just like your father, she spat, selfish and cold-hearted. Thank God for that, I shot back. At least he loved me. The line went dead. I stood there, shaking, my phone clutched in my hand. The silence that followed was deafening. When the opportunity for a month-long business trip abroad came up, I jumped at it. A chance to get away, to clear my head. As I boarded the plane, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. Maybe this was what I needed, some time and distance to figure things out. After a month away, I was looking forward to the comfort of my own bed. The business trip had been successful but exhausting, and all I wanted was to kick off my shoes and relax in my apartment. But as I turned the key in the lock, something felt off. The door swung open to reveal a completely different apartment. Gone were my carefully chosen furnishings, replaced by unfamiliar decor. A startled couple stared at me from the couch. Who are you? I demanded, my heart racing. What are you doing in my apartment? The man stood up, looking confused. Your apartment? We bought this place a couple of weeks ago from a woman named Linda, I think. The world tilted on its axis. Linda, my mother. No, it couldn't be, I said, my voice shaking. There must be some mistake. I never sold this apartment. I've been out of the country. The couple exchanged worried glances. We have all the paperwork, the woman said hesitantly. Maybe you should talk to your realtor. I stumbled out of the apartment, my mind reeling. My first instinct was to call the police, report a fraud, but a nagging voice in my head told me to confront Mom first. I needed to hear it from her. With trembling fingers, I dialed her number. It rang once, twice. Hello, Sarah, Mom's voice was sickeningly sweet. How was your trip? Cut the crap, Mom, I snarled. What did you do to my apartment? There was a pause, then, to my shock, Linda laughed, actually laughed. Oh, Sarah, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, if you had just shared your wealth, willingly, it wouldn't have come to this. You brought this on yourself, you know. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. You sold my apartment? How could you? You'll what? Linda interrupted, her tone suddenly sharp. Report your own mother to the authorities? Please, we both know you don't have the spine for that. The call ended, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, homeless and in shock, but Linda's smug certainty had ignited a fire in me. Without thinking, I hailed a cab and gave the driver Linda and Richard's address. I pounded on the door, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Richard answered, his face a mask of confusion. Sarah, what's going on? I pushed past him into the house. Where's Linda? I demanded. She's out, Richard said, still looking bewildered. Sarah, what's this about? In a rush, I told him everything. The apartment, Linda's confession, all of it. As I spoke, I watched the color drain from Richard's face. But that's impossible, he stammered. We don't need money for Thomas's education. I've already set aside funds for that. We stared at each other, the truth dawning on us both. With shaking hands, Richard began pulling out financial statements, credit card bills. As we pored over them, a horrifying picture emerged. Mom had secretly taken out loans and was now mired in debt. I had no idea, Richard whispered, looking shell-shocked. All this time, I felt a strange mix of vindication and pity. Richard had been just as deceived as I had been. As the full extent of Linda's deception became clear, I felt a cold resolve settle over me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was fraud, plain and simple. I didn't hesitate. The moment I hung up with the 911 operator, a weight lifted off my shoulders. For too long, I'd been Mom's victim. Not anymore. The investigation that followed was brutal but necessary. Every rock overturned revealed more of Linda's deceptions. She hadn't just forged my signature to sell my apartment. She'd been living a complete double life. Credit card statements revealed extravagant purchases, designer clothes, luxury spa treatments, five-star hotels, all hidden from Richard, all financed through a web of lies and secret loans. The trial became a media circus. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, hungry for every sordid detail. I hated the attention, but part of me savored seeing Linda's carefully crafted image crumble in the public eye. In the end, justice prevailed. Mom was found guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, the works. The judge's words still ring in my ears, Mrs. Linda Harrison. Your actions show a blatant disregard for the law and a shocking betrayal of your family's trust. I sentence you to 3 years in prison, with an order to repay the full value of the fraudulently sold apartment to Sarah Harrison. Richard, bless him, was shell-shocked throughout the whole ordeal. The day after the sentencing, he called me. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm seeking full custody of Thomas. After what she's done, I can't let her near him." In the aftermath, I found myself rebuilding my life once again. The apartment money was returned, and I bought a small house on the outskirts of the city, a fresh start. I threw myself into running Dad's company, honoring his legacy the best way I knew how. The work was challenging but rewarding. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly standing on my own 2 feet. Thomas and I keep in touch. He's in college now, studying engineering with Richard's support. It's bittersweet, but I'm glad we have a chance at some kind of relationship. As for Linda, I haven't heard from her since the trial. I don't know if she's tried to reach out, and honestly, I don't want to know. That chapter of my life is closed.